I spy in my little eyes, an angel, she reminds me of paradise. I spy with my little eyes, an angel, she remind me of paradise. Could've been gone whenever I'm by her side, and I swear the shorty so fly, she my angel, not in the sky.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rink-Side with Hits and Clips. Well, this is going to be part 2 of episode number 7, only because we are going to be recapping the final 2 days of the Western Hockey League regular season and what went down. If you caught our episode number 7, part 1, you would have known that the Regina Pats, the Red Deer Rebels, and the Moose Jaw Warriors were fighting for those last 2 spots in the Eastern Conference, while in the Western Conference, the Seattle Thunderbirds, the Portland Winterhawks, and the Victoria Royals were fighting for the 2 final spots in the West. So let's break all of this down and get started. Well, if you're new to our channel, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate your support. And if you've been tuned into YouTube, we really encourage you guys to go check out some of our past recent content over from season 1. We've covered everything from the NHL, the AHL, the CHL, the OJHL, the PJHL, and many more. And if you have any suggestions, be sure to let us know in the comments of any of our social media platforms. You can go follow us over on our Instagram, our Blue Sky, our Spotify, as well as subscribing to our YouTube channel. Make sure to ring that notification bell so you don't miss any videos like this. Well, I have to say, it was a pretty disappointing result for myself looking at the Western Conference overall standings and how it shaped up in the end. But we're going to start with the Eastern Conference, and it was the Regina Pats and the Red Deer Rebels who clinched those last 2 playoff spots in the East. And let's just break all of this down. The Regina Pats and the Red Deer Rebels and the Moose Jaw Warriors, they all needed just 1 win to clinch a playoff spot. None of those teams won their games on Saturday. The Regina Pats, they fell 4-2 on the road to the Brandon Wheat Kings. The Moose Jaw Warriors, they fell 4-1 to the Swift Current Broncos. And the Red Deer Rebels, they lost on the road to the very tough Medicine Hat Tigers. But I want to break down a little bit more of that Moose Jaw Warriors game because, to be honest, even with Red Deer and Regina losing, Moose Jaw, they honestly should have won this game. Not to mention that they lost to the second last place team of the Eastern Conference, the Swift Current Broncos. They lost on home ice. They had 7 power plays and they didn't score on any of them. They had multiple shot opportunities and they couldn't get any past the Swift Current goalkeeper. And Moose Jaw, they just weren't playing themselves. So as a result, unfortunately, the Moose Jaw Warriors, they were unable to clinch that postseason spot. All they needed was 1 win with a Red Deer and Regina loss. Obviously, Red Deer and Regina both lost, but Moose Jaw was unable to get that win. Now, Moose Jaw was losing 3-0 after the second period, and they did make it a 3-1 game. However, Swift Current was able to put it in an empty net, and at the end of that third period, Moose Jaw really let out their frustrations over the Broncos, and it just explains why. It's totally understandable why they would. All they needed was just 1 win, and it wasn't like they were playing a top team like Prince Albert or Edmonton or Calgary. They were playing the bottom Swift Current Bronco team, so it is a very disappointing result for Moose Jaw, and as a result, that finishes the Moose Jaw season's 2025-26 season run. But I have to say, it was a pretty good season overall for Moose Jaw. They pushed to the final, and I have to say, and I have to be honest, 2 weeks ago, I did not see Moose Jaw in the playoff picture. It really seemed like Regina and Red Deer were going to take those 2 remaining spots. It was just a matter of who were they going to play in the first round. But in the end, the Moose Jaw Warriors, they just came yet so close. The Regina Pats finishing with 59 points overall to claim that 7th seed. The Red Deer Rebels claiming that 8th seed with 58 points. And then Moose Jaw, oh man, coming so close with 57 points, falling in that 9th seed. So what does this mean in terms of the playoff picture? Well, as a result, the Prince Albert Raiders, they will play the Red Deer Rebels in the first round. The Medicine Hat Tigers will play the Regina Pats. The Edmonton Oil Kings will get the Saskatoon Blades, while the Calgary Hitmen get the Brandon Wheat Kings. Now we're going to cover the upcoming dates after we conclude both the Western Conference and the games that took place yesterday, Sunday, March 22nd. But let's look over to the Western Conference and what took place on Saturday night for these clubs. Now, I was obviously following very closely with a lot of these teams, considering that there were 11 Western Hockey League games on Saturday night, and let's just see the results. Well, we know that Regina lost to the Brandon Wheat Kings 4-2. The Moose Jaw Warriors lost to the Swift Current Broncos 4-1. And the Red Deer Rebels lost to the Medicine Hat Tigers 8-3. The Calgary Hitmen, they defeated the Lethbridge Hurricanes 8-5. The Seattle Thunderbirds, they defeated the Portland Winterhawks 5-4 in overtime. We'll come back to that game in just a moment. The Prince Albert Raiders shut out the Saskatoon Blades 4-0 on the road. The Everett Silvertips defeated the Wenatchee Wild 6-5 in a very close game. The Penticton Vs shut out the Kelowna Rockets on the road 5-0. The Spokane Chiefs crushed the Tri-City Americans 6-1 in Spokane. The Prince George Cougars defeated the Victoria Royals 2-1 in a very close but heartbreaking game for Victoria. We'll come back to that game in just a moment as well. And the Kamloops Blazers, they pushed right to the end with the Vancouver Giants season, but it was the Blazers who came out on top 4-3 in overtime. Now let's take a closer look at these three in particular games. We're going to start with the Seattle Thunderbirds and the Portland Winterhawks. This was actually the second last CHL game to finish on Saturday night. However, with the Victoria Royals game already wrapping up, it didn't really matter how this game finished. But both of these teams at the time did not know if the Victoria Royals had lost or not when this game was already going into overtime. Well, Seattle picked up the victory 5-4 in Portland. There was no change in the clinching scenario for any of these teams because both of them were going to make the postseason no matter what. It was just a matter of who their opponent would be in the first round. The winner of this overtime would end up playing the Penticton Vs, the second seed, and the loser of this game would play the top seed in the first round, the Everett Silvertips. Well, with Seattle winning, and I'm not surprised that they did, they also finished with 4 points ahead of the Portland Winterhawks for that 7th seed. So Seattle will end up playing the Penticton Vs in the first round, while the Portland Winterhawks, they will end up playing the very, very difficult Everett Silvertips in the first round. As for the other matchups, though, with the Prince George Cougars defeating the Victoria Royals in a very close 2-1 victory on the road, Prince George will play the Spokane Chiefs, and the Kelowna Rockets will play the Kamloops Blazers in that first round. But let's go back to that Victoria Royals and Prince George game. We all were hoping that the Victoria Royals would get into the postseason. I honestly love the Prince George Cougars, but this was the one time I was not cheering for Prince George to win, as we just needed to get that one additional BC division team into the playoffs and knock out a US division team. Unfortunately, though, the Victoria Royals came yet so close. And what goaltending by the backup goaltender in Andrei Stebicak. He was unreal in that game. Well, the Victoria Royals, they threw 33 shots at this goalie, and Andre, man, he was stopping 32 of them, and just a phenomenal performance. And it's very interesting, and I mean, I'm not surprised that Prince George decided to go with their backup in Andrei Stebicak, but this also gives Ravenbergen a rest for the postseason, so a very smart and wise choice for the Prince George Cougars to go ahead and put their backup netminder in for this game. And as a result, they were able to push out that victory. I think this is also another win for Prince George, knocking their BC rivals out of the BC division. But as for myself, Not the result I was hoping for, and not the result I was wanting to see at the Save-On and Foods Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. The Victoria Royals were unable to clinch that spot, and that gives the Seattle Thunderbirds and the Portland Winterhawks a ledge up in that postseason round of round number 1. And I think one of the heartbreaking parts of this for the Victoria Royals in this loss was that there's a lot of overagers that were playing their final CHL Western Hockey League game that night. So it is a heartbreak, but it's just one of those things where you just have to enjoy every single moment and just play to the best of your ability. And unfortunately for the Victoria Royals, their season came to an end. And then before we get to just covering the last 2 remaining games on Sunday, March 22nd, and how those 2 games resulted, I want to talk a little bit about this Kamloops and Vancouver game. This game didn't mean anything to Kamloops as they were already in the playoffs. This didn't mean anything to Vancouver because they didn't make the playoffs. But what a performance that the Vancouver Giants put up against the Kamloops Blazers. So unfortunately, there was a shot that went off of the Kamloops Blazers goaltender's mask. His helmet came off, and Vancouver put the puck in. No instant doubt it was going to be ruled no goal, and that's what happened. The Vancouver Giants, they almost ended up winning this game, with this game going to overtime, and just like 16 seconds, I think it was maybe 10 seconds into overtime, 12 seconds into overtime, the Kamloops Blazers were able to get the victory over the Giants. And that was a very close game. That was the last game for Saturday night in the WHL. But as for the Sunday games that took place, again, these games didn't really matter in the standings. Edmonton and Calgary, both of those teams are making the postseason along with Seattle and Spokane. But the Edmonton Oil Kings, they crushed their Alberta rivals, the Calgary Hitmen, 7-1 at Rogers Place in Edmonton. While in Spokane, Washington, the Seattle Thunderbirds shut out the Spokane Chiefs 4-0. And I think that might be a little bit of a momentum boost for that in that game for Seattle, considering that they made the playoffs. They can just go out and crush their opponents. Now, we already know that the 2 games that are already set to happen and were already determined this past weekend, it was the Saskatoon Blades who are going to be taking on the Edmonton Oil Kings, and the Brandon Wheat Kings are taking on the Calgary Hitmen. So those 2 games were already decided earlier this weekend. It was a matter of the seeding and who was going to play their additional opponents. We're just going to recap what games are going to be taking place this coming Friday, March 27th. The Red Deer Rebels are going to be taking on the Prince Albert Raiders. The Regina Pats are going to be facing against the Medicine Hat Tigers. Remember, the Medicine Hat Tigers are those reigning 2024-2025 WHL champions from last year who ended up going to Rimouski for the Memorial Cup. So we'll see if they can defend their title once again. The Spokane Chiefs will be taking on the Prince George Cougars. That will be a fantastic matchup. The Portland Winterhawks will be taking on the Everett Silvertips. The Kamloops Blazers will be taking on the Kelowna Rockets. And for their first ever WHL postseason appearance, the Penticton Vs will be playing on home ice against the Seattle Thunderbirds. So be sure to tune into these games for free on Victory Plus, and the first round of the playoffs all begin this coming Friday, March 27th. You will not want to miss it. So thanks everyone so much for tuning into this part 2 of episode number 7. Let me know your thoughts on who you think is going to advance to the second round. Who do you think is going to make it to the Memorial Cup this year? We already know that Kamloops will be in the Memorial Cup regardless, since they are the hosts this year. But will the Medicine Hat Tigers defend their Western Hockey League title? And will the Spokane Chiefs defend their Western Conference title, as it was Medicine Hat and Spokane in the WHL Championship Series last year? We'll have to see what happens, but we appreciate your support, everyone, and we will see you in the next episode.